Hi guys, and welcome to episode 5 of the More Than MS podcast. And this episode is called Mental Health with Danny. A year to this day, I reached out to Danny, as now I've started doing these podcasts. And I've actually got him coming to my work tomorrow.
Which is brilliant. And you sold me very well.
Did I? Yeah, so I work in sales as well, guys.
Yeah, no, I could tell from the first moment we spoke, but I think it was brilliant. Obviously, just seeing your enthusiasm around, creating change for your company and for the people in your company, and to now be at the point where we span it round, or you span it round really quickly. It went from just that initial conversation. I think you messaged me, and I got the Instagram message. And then we had a call the same day. Yeah. By the next day, you'd already set up like a meeting with.
There's no messing around.
It was quick, and then it's only been a few weeks that we managed to get an exciting project with the company.
It has. It's been really quick, and I'm hoping that you're going to do some further work with our company as well. And I just think it just works really well hand in hand, both of us together, because let alone you being someone that. I don't know, it feels nice that you are someone that I've met or known through my friends. It feels like there's more of that personal connection.
Yeah, it's
nice. I saw him and I thought, he needs to come to our company. Everything that I researched and read up about you on your website, I just thought you were perfect for it. But anyway, you're welcome. So I would just love to get into kind of the basics about you, Danny. So first of all, what inspired you to become this public speaker and have this now as your career?
I think the inspiration for me was in the moments or in my journey through kind of education and through school, college, university, and then the corporate world, having gone through some difficult experiences that had kind of impacted my beliefs, which had impacted my mental health and how I navigated the world and all those sorts of things. I'd never actually seen or heard like a story. So not through primary school, secondary school, any of those environments I'd ever heard what it felt to, struggle with depression or anxiety, or the impact of a suicide, or which were experiences that I'd gone through, which obviously I'll speak about in a moment. But I'd never just seen that raw, open, honest, like lived experience piece. Everything I'd ever heard, bearing in mind we didn't really have any education around it in secondary school. There was none around that. So it wasn't in primary school, obviously.
No, I don't remember there being
exactly
much
that. And I don't think there's any in college really. The one I do remember in corporate was delivered by different demographics, someone that I couldn't really connect with, and it was very like, here's 5 areas of your well-being. And
like a PowerPoint slide of just talking about
5 areas of your well-being and to drink water and the importance of the gym and those sorts of things and what self-awareness was. And I was like, it's good, so I get it all, but like at that point I was really, really, really struggling, and the last thing I needed was to be told that
drink your water, go to the gym, when you can't even bring yourself to even just do the smallest things.
Exactly. And I felt like a great need to be understood, and I felt like I felt like a little alien, in my job, because I was surrounded by these like high performers, and I was a high performer myself who'd hit this this block again of burnout coupled with the depression and the anxiety, which made the job extremely tough. And I was struggling a lot at that point, and I was like, I wish I had someone I could connect with. I then had my own journey through therapy, and again we can come on to some of those things, and that was magic for me. And I was in therapy for a year, so I had a year's worth of psychotherapy and medication, which ended up transforming my life, and I'd learned so much about the events that I'd been through and how they'd shaped a belief system that had impacted behaviours that had then had negative impacts on my wider life and the important areas of my life and my mental health. And I'd learned about all this stuff through therapy. I'd learned about how powerful conversation was. And I came out the other side, and I had this huge like obligation to give back.
Share that with others.
Yeah, and I was like, why have I never known any of this earlier? I'm 22 and I started therapy. I've never had any of this earlier.
Because it's just not shown to us, I feel like. You were just saying, I don't ever remember when I was in school to have someone come in and just speak about mental health. And if anything, I feel like it's only really been the past 5 years, I feel that people have started to actually talk more about mental health, and of course there's so much stigma around it, and unfortunately I think that's where, especially maybe growing up in like the 2000s and it just wasn't, even though that doesn't seem like that long ago, I still feel like a lot has changed in those times. And
definitely,
when you think our parents were raised by their parents, that's going back a whole other generation, especially when it comes down to perhaps men, in terms of not every man, not every family, but in general speaking, a lot of them were sort of told to just get on with it. Just deal with it, or go to school, do this, do that, drink your water, do your exercise.
And I think there's that piece around it. A lot of the rhetoric we get, or we see being pushed to young lads as well, is like, don't show your emotions, like keep those to yourself, like don't show your vulnerability. And I think some of that messaging for young lads is tough because it does add to the stigma, and the difficulty with that is the impacts of never allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And I spoke about this on an interview with a friend of mine just the other week around masculinity, and it was kind of the idea of like vulnerability. Well, first of all, what is vulnerability? It's like, it's a conversation like this. It's being able to love someone, because there's risk of being made a fool of.
Of course.
There's like the business is that's a form of vulnerability, because again, there's so much risk in there. It's anything where you could fail or be made to look like a fool. That's what's being vulnerable. It's okay. It's not just men crying or having deep conversation. Like, there's a wide range of it, but I think if we tell lads to never be vulnerable, it's great in the short term because they can always be safe.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I've not really thought of it that way before. But
in the long term, it stops them from finding the meaning in the life that gives them fulfillment. 100%. So all of those things that comes with vulnerability. So the idea that, okay, I can be vulnerable in a relationship, but I can find love properly.
Or and you're not going to find that until you're vulnerable.
Yeah, and have deep.
They don't want to take that risk.
Exactly, and have deep conversations and deep connection with my friends, because I can take that step to talk about. Yeah. So it can nurture those relationships. So it's interesting, like the idea of like, sometimes we tell young lads, and the rhetoric from kind of Andrew Tate and what that kind of like that end, the darker end of it, of masculinity.
Which is so prominent still at the moment, isn't it?
Of course, can be great in the short term if you want to, if you're what you're looking to do is minimise short-term pain
and have short-term success and happiness.
But it means you miss out.
It's not real, or it won't be long-standing.
100%, and that comes back to the piece of the inspiration around me starting, because I was also in that headspace. Whereas I don't want to talk to a geezer about my feelings. No way. And I don't want to take medication for.
We'll go down the B, have a pint, mate, you'll be alright.
There's no, it didn't make sense.
And that's really interesting. Yeah, go on, what were we going to say?
Just lastly, and it was through me understanding how powerful being vulnerable was for a year, and it wasn't a quick process, and it wasn't easy, and it was the hardest thing I have ever had to do, like do in my life, and even the conversations that had to come after it with family were also extremely tough. I learned though in those moments how much strength it takes to be vulnerable, and actually how powerful vulnerability was. And I was like, that was the piece where I was like, I can't just keep this to myself. And I was like, ask myself a question of, if my salary, because I was talented, head boy in school, like I wrote loads of music, I was on the football team, so I was a pretty well-rounded kid. And I said, look, if my salary was like, didn't change above £20,000, knowing that obviously, like I had really big dreams, and I definitely want money in my life, 100%. But I was like, if my salary didn't change above that, like what would I do every single day and wake up and do and be happy? And it was like working with the kids. So to answer your question in a well-rounded way, that was my inspiration for starting, was understanding the power of vulnerability, having never seen it in the environments where I needed it, and then being like, I just wish I was the voice.
That's really amazing. That's shown me, and I've never heard someone put it that way before. That's given me like a new outlook, because I never really saw vulnerability as being a weakness for men as such. I think when we talk about men and the way that they want to come across as being strong and determined, I never really factored in that actually vulnerability was a big part of that. And you're so right, I think you have to be vulnerable in life to be able to get things that you really, really want to achieve. So
and those are various meaning, exactly those things that actually support anyone's mental health, meaningful conversation, connection. Like lads are craving for that stuff, men are craving for that 100%. Stuff. But if we can never be vulnerable in any aspects of our life, then we put barriers in front of those things that would give us fulfillment, and then end up suffering in the long run.
That's so true. I think, and that's the reason why there's a saying out there as well, guys, that behind every great man is a greater woman.
It's a great lady.
Great lady, yes. And I don't know, I'm not saying that's always the case. I know that women, I'm not here preaching women, I'm here preaching humans, right? Good humans.
100%.
It does not matter what your sex is, your race, anything. If you're
100%.
a good person, that's it. But that there is a reason maybe behind that saying, because they generally say that women are a lot more in touch with their emotions. They're not afraid to sort of be vulnerable, whereas maybe men feel like they have that safe space at home with that woman to be able to do that, because that's what, again, we're all human, and that's 100%. What men as well as women, we all crave that vulnerability and to be able to have those deep, meaningful conversations. It's just, unfortunately, the way that social life has gone and the way that the world has projected itself is that men should not be more that way, but that's what we need to change.
And I agree with what you're saying though there, like if there is a man who has that space with a woman, and let's say he has big ambitions and dreams, and and maybe he's an entrepreneur, whatever it is. I'm not saying they're typical trait, like not every lad has to be an entrepreneur, but let's say they're in that sort of world, having that space where you can have a lady,
even if it's your mum.
Yeah, exactly. Well, 100. The amount of times my mum has been that woman.
Yeah.
But it's hugely important, and that by definition, like what that does is, like the way that phrase works is that what we're saying is when a strong man who has ambitions or dreams or whatever, he's working towards these things, and he has a lady who can, like you said there, can provide him that emotional space. What that does to him is make him greater than what he would be without the lady.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really important piece, isn't it? And that's it. And it's like those things, a man having that space does so much for them, regardless of whether they're an entrepreneur or whether they're just a student, or
just
whether
in
whatever
general,
it is, or whether they just work a 9 to 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Or whether they stay at home and look after the kids themselves.
1,000,000%, yeah.
As long as they've got that space, it's a huge thing.
I agree, and that's why as well I feel like I personally, like I said, I'm not preaching about women here, and we're not getting into that, but I do really like that saying, because I think it just sort of shows the characteristics between a man and a woman, because we are different in our own ways, whether we like it or not. We are, and I think that's what, with me, we're going to be getting into. I want to hear more about when you talk about your talents and your childhood as well. I want to get into that, but when obviously I'm a big advocate for men's mental health. Now it's really strange because I don't actually have directly any men in my life that I talk to about things like this, or I don't have that in my immediate circle. However, there has been things that I've seen growing up, that I've seen within my school, within my college, within my workplace, through other people, and nearly every single time that I've heard of, let's say, suicide, it's been a man, and it's hit home in some respects, and there's just been something in me that thinks, do you know what, maybe to all these men out there, this is going to sound really strange, but maybe I can't be all their wives, right? I can't be all their mums, but I'm still a woman, and I still have that space, and just the same way I want to try and help everybody, I feel like when I was doing my mental health talk at work, and I was talking briefly on the subject of sort of men and mental health, I said, even when men can't find their voices, I want to stand up here and try and be that voice. And that's why I'm getting Danny into my work tomorrow, because although I can stand up there and talk about men, I'm not a man. Disclaimer. So you're the perfect person to do that tomorrow, and I'm so glad that I've got you on board for this. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
And we are speaking to just the lads tomorrow.
You are. There will be women there as well. Okay. But I did put a message out today to say I encourage everyone to come, because I actually said to the women, even though it's not directly going to apply to you, it's going to be more so for the men, I want you to think about your brothers, your dads, your uncles, your male colleagues and friends, and I want you to listen in and also try and get that other perspective of men and how maybe you could help in that situation as well. And that's why it isn't actually directed at men. I'm a man delivering the talk, so you get it from the perspective of a man who's gone through, facing some of those pressures of growing up as a male, and how they impacted my decision making at times, and the barrier between
me and having vulnerable conversation, and that came inherently from being a lad.
Yeah.
You know, and some other things as well. But what everyone will be able to get is that the women can have that insight around what it might be like for, like you said, the brother, the father, colleague, whatever it is. But the fundamental things at the heart that I speak about relate to anyone.
Everybody, absolutely.
And the amount of people that, you know, men and women that are just massively impacted from the talk, has been amazing. It's like the key driver for me. So obviously you'll see that tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm intrigued with your childhood then, because I know you mentioned that you were sort of head boy, very talented. So what was childhood like for you growing up?
Childhood Dan was a blessing. He was a geezer, you know, from a young age. So I was like playing guitar from 5. I was super active as a kid. I was like always in hospital because of banging my head on something.
Always
or
like
breaking my
injuring
arm.
yourself.
Yeah, just running up walls. Like
that's how childhood should be, though.
Of course, yeah, a ton of energy, like sledging down hills when there's no snow and all that stuff.
I love that.
But yeah, we started playing guitar at 5 years old, which I think had a huge impact on the way my brain develops. Because when you write in music, it forms different pathways. So it's creativity. So you know, especially from a young age, and it was brilliant. And I picked guitar up so quick. And then I was like this little rocker kid at like 5. My first album was like a Nirvana album.
Oh, I love that.
I was listening to like Metallica at 6, 7 years old. Like I had this leather biker's jacket with loads of tassels on when I was young that I rocked up to school with one day, and everyone was like, "What is that?"
Do you drive a motorbike now?
No.
Oh,
My mum would kill me.
Oh, really?
But it's a dream of mine to do one day.
Just don't tell your mum.
Yeah.
We won't tell your mum. She listens. We won't tell her.
Yeah, but
secret.
You know, just started like self-taught on piano from 8. Started writing music at 8, 9 years old.
Wow.
Performed through school. Was on the football team, like athletics, 100-meter sprinter. So I was like this well-rounded kid who was, you know, everyone always says, and like I'm annoyingly good at everything.
Yeah, you had everything going for you.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
And just such like I think this comes from my mum, just like a willingness to just be curious and be who I was,
do whatever
who I wanted
comes
to
to
be.
mind. Just do it.
And my mum was brilliant for that because she never boxed me in to how she wanted me to be as a kid.
Yeah.
Like if I wanted to be Daniel, who was into my heavy metal, she was fine.
Yeah.
And then when I got my Tupac album, I went into all like hip hop with these big hats and bandanas. Like she just let me find my own little
my
path.
mum's the same. It's amazing to have a parent like that. It was
wonderful. However, went through experiences which shaped or would shape the rest of my future. So my family's Polish, so I'm half Polish. Yeah,
cool.
half
I didn't know
Polish.
that. Yeah.
Kind of grandparents came over with like £5, and then there was some trauma because of obviously what happened.
Of course.
Around the war. And my grandma, bless her,
having to start a new family, having a new country. It's a lot.
She'd been in like the forced work camps in Russia.
Wow.
So my mum, especially on the Polish side, tough upbringing. I think my dad was exactly the same. He had a tough upbringing. But then they came together and obviously had a wonderful family. So me and my 3 sisters.
Oh wow, you got 3 sisters. Are you the eldest or
middle? Well, kind of middle child. Yeah,
okay, so you've got like the older sisters and the younger sisters.
2 older.
So well grounded.
But yeah, kind of my childhood, I had some tough experiences from kind of the first ones being my grandparents. Ended up losing 3 of them by the time I was 5 or 6 years old.
Oh, okay,
so and that happened in like quick succession of each other, which when you're young, obviously you don't have a full.
You don't really realise
comprehend fully what's going on. But I'd been to a funeral, and I was because I was going to church. I knew what God was and thinking about life and death and all those things. Dad was brilliant, like just such a large, loving, like caring man, a load of energy. Like always being my mum would always describe him as like the Joker. Like he would just
always coming out with the jokes.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe at inappropriate times.
Yeah.
Always there.
He's just larger than life in terms of his character. I think what I've learned later on is he'd had some issues, when he was growing up and whatnot. And my dad was kind of a heavy drinker, which made the relationship with him and mum tough at times. They ended up then getting a divorce at 5 years old, and he sat me down and was like, "Dan, I won't be living with you anymore." So there was already from like that early age kind of those experiences which were tough, and I think that's why I took more of a liking towards like angry heavy metal music.
That would make sense.
Because it was like, that was my
it was
way
expression.
of connecting. Yeah.
It's
And I
amazing
could
that you did
connect.
that through music
100%.
as well.
So it was such an important thing.
Yeah.
Mum went over the next few years chasing kind of career ladder. She was a teacher, and I could kind of sense like things were different. Two very different households.
Yeah.
Than where my dad had lived with his new girlfriend at the time. And there were times when I was constantly like living at my dad's friends because my dad was getting kicked out of where he was living.
Yeah.
So I knew there was a bit of turbulence.
I can relate to that as well.
Yeah.
My mum and dad split, and it was always moving. Dad was doing shared houses with these weird people. I hated to go around and stay on the weekends. So I know that feeling as well.
But I loved it at the same time though, because my dad's like, I got to be a bit reckless.
So you were allowed to be
beer
naughty.
Kind of like 8 years old, a little sip of the beer kind of.
I bet you thought, I'm gonna go to dad's and be a rebel this weekend.
Yeah, all of that. Like, you know, that's where I was allowed to like
kind of let loose.
Run around the woods or whatever. And do
let all the energy out. That's
Skin
why you end up in hospital.
Exactly. Yeah, most of the time. Just like driving sitting on the front of motorbikes and stuff. It was fun, but obviously, you could see the duality in terms of two different households. And again, my mum, stronger than ever, chasing that career side, and then a bit more chaos on my dad's side. And then, 9 years old, I think, coming home from school or being in school, and my head teacher just said, Dan, can you grab your bags? And I was meant to be going visiting my dad. I would stay with my dad every other week, and my mum would come to pick me up from school, and bless her, she'd pick me up in the car. My sister was there inside, which was a bit unusual because they always went home separately, and I could see my mum. I knew something was wrong, and she took me to my auntie's house, and she tried to tell us at my auntie's, and she couldn't. She said, right, the kid's back in the car, because she was pacing up and down. And then in the car, I remember I was in the back seat, and she just said, something's happened with Dad. She said, everyone's at your grandma's house and your dad's not there. She didn't have to say anything. I knew. And in the car, my sisters were quiet, and I started hitting the back of the chair, and we went back to the house, and then that's what she had to say, that my dad had obviously taken his life, and ended up just calling my friend straight away. And that was a day that obviously just, I ended up crying for hours and hours, and then I slept for 4 hours, and it felt like 4 days. And I remember my grandma waking me up, and I was just drained. And found out that my dad had obviously taken his life, which was huge.
I'm so sorry to hear that. And at that age as well, where you've got so many emotions you don't even understand yet as well, and pacing through you. But you're saying that you knew. It was just a feeling that you had within you. When
my mum said, everyone's at your grandma's house,
you
straight
knew.
away, and I'll never forget it. I started just hitting the back of the car seat, and my mum said, just squeeze my hand as tightly as you can. I never actually talk about it in this part of it. But I'll never forget it. Like that day, I could draw it out for you. If it was a film, I'd be able to. It stays with you, and that's the power or the impact of these adverse childhood experiences, the impact of trauma. The way that shaped my worldview moving forward was massive. So I had this belief system then that formed at 9. So Dad had actually called a week before to speak to everyone in the family, and I didn't pick up the phone.
No.
I didn't speak to him. So I had this belief system that formed, and the guilt was a lot stronger. It was like, I need to make up to my family. There was all of these beliefs basically as a result of the event, which then made navigating later life
going into your teenagehood. That's what I was going to ask you.
Relationships and all of that, super tough.
How would you say that you feel that experience shaped going into your teenage years, especially then going into your adult years? Because I can understand straight away the fact that you've mentioned that your dad called the week before, you didn't answer, which is not,
of course,
you know that, I don't even need to say that, but that, of course, and you've just mentioned, sort of shaped that feeling of how you feel guilt goes and everything. How did that form into your teenage years and into your adult years?
So the belief system was that I believed I needed to make up to my family, because I believed it was my fault. I was like, if I had just answered the phone, you would still be here. So Dan, this is actually your fault, because I was like, I know if he would have heard my voice, I know I'd been able to talk him out of it. That was my thinking, I'm like, it's me. There was also the idea of my emotions being too heavy for people. So the reason I didn't answer the phone was because I was angry at my dad. So that was me putting a healthy boundary in place, but I ended up losing someone. So what became really tough for me was showing anger in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it's going to be way too much for people, so boundaries were really tough.
Yeah.
There was the idea of money that became really important because Dad didn't have money and he was getting kicked out of his home, you know, and struggling on that side. So my logic as a 9-year-old and what I'd learned was, I obviously need money because that will mean that I'm safe.
Is it like everything that you saw within your dad, you thought, I need to be better or different than that?
100%.
Yeah.
Because it felt genetic. I'm like, I'm his son. Like if he's done it.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because suicide isn't genetic that way.
No.
But my proclivity, so my likeliness to attempt to take my own life because of my experiences is now higher.
Well, mental health carries within families, doesn't it? And it is due to some form of genetics and the way that we talk about generational trauma as well. And I see a lot of myself within my mum, my nan, my aunties, and so on, that still exists within us. So I understand what you're saying.
The generational trauma, like stress can be passed through skin.
Yeah.
Even things like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the conversations you have in your household around all of those things. It's the way that your mum reacts with you as a result of maybe not having a parent who could because of the situation she was in or after war. And that's how it can be passed through. But obviously, kind of suicide isn't genetic as a.
It doesn't mean that's going to happen. Yeah. Of course.
But my likeliness to attempt to take my own life was higher because of what I'd experienced and because of the loss that I'd been through. And that my odds were a lot different. You know, they were stacked against me a little bit, but my belief was, you know, is because he's done it, I'll do it. So I need to be the opposite. I need to be, you know, wealthy. I need to be rich.
That makes sense.
It makes sense
in what, of course.
And then also the pressure, because I'm now the only lad in my family
of the house. Yeah.
So there's also that pressure, which ties into the other masculine stuff that I was talking about before, which we can come on to. The flip side of it, though, heading into teenage years, because I was writing loads of music and I was driven, super driven. Like I was, because of the ambition now and the need to be successful. Yeah. That manifested as a healthy character trait of Daniel, who was super driven. Yeah. And went into school and was talking about.
But it seems like you already had the talents naturally anyway. So on top of that, having that drive.
Exactly, but that's seen as like a healthy thing because I'm a driven young kid who's talking about goals and how he wants to change the world. So who's going to think he's not going to struggle? When actually that stemmed from, part of it was unhealthy. It stemmed from the trauma. It was a trauma response. Yeah, and the independency as well. So Daniel coming up as an independent child who is super driven and ambitious and wants to change the world and is really clever and just can work at something and turns into this mode of just being able to, you know, to get things
that's
done.
you actually running away from the issue, which they don't realise.
School didn't know. No one would. No one would. And so I had this amazing time in school, where, you know, I was writing music and I was performing on stage and it was great. And the other thing was my relationship with music became a lot stronger because of the experience. I had something to write about that.
Absolutely.
Like, I really did. And it was my way of venting. But as much as like it was wonderful, and I was doing all these things. Like I was extra on Waterloo Road.
Oh, were you? Yeah. What year?
It was like in the first few seasons.
I thought you looked familiar.
No, you wouldn't. No, it's extras in like far.
Yeah.
I think it was on TV once. I had to rob someone's phone and run down the corridor. Typical Rochdale school. But you know, I had all these amazing things that were happening, but at the same time, I still had Daniel who would cry himself to sleep. You know, Daniel who would lock himself in the music room and have to write music about suicide just to express himself, and everyone's looking at me like crying at these songs, and I'm just writing like, why are people crying? Because it was my reality. I didn't understand.
Well, it seems like you didn't really know too much different. It was such a young age as well, so your brain's actually adapted to taking that in as normality in a sense. Yeah.
But that came through kind of the music. So it was weird. There was like this juxtaposition of Daniel, who's super talented, doing well in school, head boy by the end of it, you know, driven, like socially accepted, like good crack to be with. And then these moments of like just intense loneliness, like massive loneliness. And because nobody noticed, not family and not the school, it then reinforced the idea that I've only got myself to rely on.
Yeah, of course.
So now I'm thinking, I'm showing all these signs. And the other thing was, so the music that I was writing, I was leaving what I call behavioural breadcrumbs, which were cries for help through behaviour subconsciously when I didn't have the capacity to say, I'm struggling with Dad, I'm dealing with anxiety, my chest is tight, I'm agitated because of this, my mental health struggling, I feel alone, I feel like I've just got myself, I feel like I'm damaged, and I'm struggling. I couldn't conceptualise any of that because I didn't know what these feelings were.
No.
Because I'd never heard a conversation, which comes back to it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, then it kind of just reinforced the idea. So I'm leaving these breadcrumbs that didn't get noticed because I was high achieving, which then just made little Daniel think, yeah, no one's seeing. I'm crying for help, no one's seeing it, so you've only got yourself done.
Yeah.
So then it became even tougher to talk as time went on after school.
Of course. And it's in a way as well that you're, like you said, overachieving, you're doing amazing. No one's going to question or think that there is something wrong, which is such a universal thing, because like the saying goes, there's always the people that seem the happiest and they're smiling and they can talk about things that actually are struggling with a lot internally and inside. However, I feel like those people, it's a lot of masking and it's a lot of projecting, that you want to project yourself as being this happy person.
So if I've never heard a conversation through primary school, and I'm not having it at home because my parents aren't talking about it, because their parents didn't speak about it, and as a result, or not talking about it with my friends because it's not happening anymore, so I'm not being educated on it.
No.
When I reached the age of 15, 16, and now I'm dealing with suicidal ideation at times, or depression, or anxiety, or agitation to the point where I would have to go on runs at 3 in the morning for like 20k, 30k runs across the hills.
Wow.
Because I couldn't sit still.
Just couldn't. No.
Yeah. What am I supposed to do when I don't know what that is?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be like,
so
I'm not
this
gonna speak
energy
about
inside of you that needs to present itself in some way.
Yeah, and those symptoms, like I'm not gonna be able to talk about because I don't know what they are, because I've never heard them, so then I'll hide them. And that's where, you know, that melting pot of trying to find myself, believing I could only rely on myself, believing I was the man of the house, even at that young age, which wasn't true. I was a kid. I wasn't an adult. I was playing the role of a parent, and I wouldn't allow my parents to parent me as a result. So there's all this like just resistance of a capacity to be able to accept support, and that massively impacted then my time from 16 to 22. The next
22.
that
That's the
next
year
kind
that
of
you
8
started
years.
to do therapy, wasn't it?
Yeah. So in that 8 years, you know, I ended up failing university, nearly failing college. I fell into drugs at 16, 17. You know, started getting into fights here and there, just this aggression I started on people, which was so. I was Daniel who was singing and cheering songs. You just seen a photo of me. And if you see a photo of me from 15-year-old Dan to 17-year-old Dan, it's like you can see it.
That sounds like years of suppression where you've been having these emotions, but not knowing how to sort of voice them. Does not surprise me.
Those behaviours serve the purpose. So every behaviour that we have as an individual will serve a purpose. If you're addicted to something, it's giving you something. There's a value exchange. That's the reason why. You know, and it's kind of like, what is it that those behaviours are giving you? I know the drugs for me gave me a release of that. It gave me a way to get rid of all the Daniel, I need to be like this, and all that pressure of Daniel needs to be this and rich and da-da-da. It gives me a capacity to just get rid of all of that and have this recklessness. It gave me something. You know, but it was an unhealthy way to deal with the things that I was going through, because I didn't have the tools to deal with it in a healthy manner. And as a byproduct, so all of the kind of drugs and whatnot, they did serve a purpose, because I was Daniel who, you know, it was my way of getting rid of that anger, basically, because I didn't have the healthy tools to deal with it. But obviously those behaviours then had a negative impact on how I was feeling. So it was that negative perpetuating cycle then, that I have these feelings and I turn to behaviours which I think are good, which give me a short-term release, but in the long term make me feel worse. And as a result, now I'm on a downward spiral. And so the next 8 years, you know, I nearly failed college, got into university, failed first year, switched my course to music business, dropped out of uni after 3 years, still doing drugs. You know, got myself into a pretty emotionally abusive relationship that I was unable to set boundaries in as a result of the
You hadn't worked out your boundaries yet, though, had you?
Yeah, no, true. But I couldn't display anger healthily as well, so it was really it was dangerous. I was in a vulnerable place to be in something like that. Then, you know, I had a failed business after university. I got into financial debt. I moved 11, 12 different places of residence. I didn't really have a stable home. My relationship with my family just at points was non-existent. Not non-existent, but dark and tough.
Yeah. Not where maybe it was once before.
Yeah, just not seeing them for months at a time, not speaking to them. When they do call, I just can't speak on the phone because I know they'll know that I'm not good. Yeah. You know, to then get a job in the corporate world and smash it because it felt like my last opportunity to save myself. I remember thinking, this is it. And then hitting burnout and going from top newcomer almost to then, you know, struggling massively to hit my basic KPIs and that fall from grace and struggling to then maintain that job for the next 12 months and having to leave that sector. Like, I always talk about that 8 years as being, you know, I missed so much opportunity, so much as a result of the emotional complexities and my inability to have my lack of support and the inability for me to give myself what I needed as well, which I get as a kid. I'm not saying everyone's going to go through these things. I always think, imagine if Daniel could have put down some of that emotional weight a bit sooner. Maybe I could have been Dan who completed university and was working in the music industry, which was a big dream of mine. And obviously, thank God we've got back to the music with the Channel 4 show. Amazing, sensational. So pleased to have done it. But now, you know, it took so much time. And then I learned, obviously I went through therapy and as a result of therapy, hands down, I would not be in this position now where just
I think,
the past 3.5
therapy,
years, everything's
I truly believe everyone needs therapy. Whatever you've been through, it shapes you completely and it makes you see things in a light that maybe you've never seen them before and makes you look at things differently. And I've had therapy. I actually when I was quite an angry teenager, believe it or not. I show no anger now, guys. But I really was quite an angry teenager, and I didn't really understand why. It was like, now you're talking, I can definitely relate to sort of a lot of suppressed emotions, a lot of things that I was dealing with, because I was similar in the sense of when I was in school, there was never a bad word said about me. You know, parents' evenings, oh, Danielle's doing amazing, she's this, maybe she talks a bit too much sometimes, but, you know, she's great.
That's why you're good at sales.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I was meant for sales my whole life.
That's it.
But there was never anything bad, but it was funny because at home, it was literally like I was a different person. There is like two sides of me, and I just, when I was at home, my anger was so bad, and I just did not understand why. I mean, I went through as well a very messy divorce of my parents. My dad is not present, never really has been. Mum's very much an overachiever, like you mentioned with yours, always climbing that career ladder and doing amazing. She took care of 2, you know, kids as a single mum, but that comes with a lot of stress within itself. And yeah, so they actually tried. I went to counselling when I was 15. I did not find that helped me at all, which I know I'm preaching therapy now, but it's interesting because when I was 15, I don't know, have you heard of sort of Camp H?
Yes, obviously working in education.
Yeah.
Every child that I speak to who's been in camps tells me that it made them feel worse.
100%. That's my exact thing.
Experience.
It made me feel worse because I would walk into that room. I would just tell this woman everything, but she had no real way of guiding me through anything. It was like she was just looking for me to tell her what's gone wrong in my life, what makes me upset. Now, being someone who can just talk so freely, I've always been that way. I was letting it all out, and it's very much like kind of like, okay, thank you for coming in. See you next week.
Yeah. And nothing in the midterm.
Nothing. Absolutely.
And that's the piece, isn't it? Is like they're super overstretched. I get the intention there is good. I 100% get it.
Yeah, of course.
I have spoken to kids where, you know, they talk about their experience, changing counsellors all the time. You know, not having counselling for long enough, like the quality of it not being great, not being really given a roadmap to get from point A to B, and being told to have a cup of tea if they're stressed and all those things. I find it tough because I get how a service can be overstretched and get to a point where quality drops.
100%.
But I also find it very frustrating because, and it's a systemic issue, isn't it, with the education sector as a whole, and the other social pressures that government don't fix, which is another podcast for another time.
Yeah, we can get into that next time.
We can do round two. But when I'm seeing kids who come up to me and just say it made me feel 10 times worse.
Yeah.
And I appreciate part of therapy is that you're going to feel worse because that's the part of processing
emotions.
You
have to bring it up to the surface.
Of course.
But then you have to work with that, and you need ways to work with it.
Yeah.
And that's not, like I said, I understand they are overstretched, and it's really hard to find therapists now where they're available. So it was definitely, I was on the wait list for like a year as well.
Yeah.
But now
that time is too long.
It's too long, and that's a whole nother subject. I feel like we of course we need more counsellors, we need more therapists, we need to do better in the mental health service, especially with children.
What kids need is the positive role models.
They do.
That's what they need. Voice has gone. A lot of speaking.
Yeah.
But yeah, they need the. You
can have water if you want.
No, don't worry. It's good. I'll grab some if I need some. But my biggest belief is that kids need meaningful relationships.
They need someone not to talk to them like a child all the time as well.
Yeah, that as well, 100%. But those meaningful relationships work wonders for kids, especially if you've got a kid who's gone through trauma, and because of the way that if they're in fight or flight all the time, they can't actually learn, and it's so important that for kids who've been through trauma, they have meaningful relationships of trust, of people who care for them and will turn up for them even if they're being disruptive or whatever, and will be stable and strong for them throughout education, who they can rely on. That helps then nurture that child to and the actual development of the brain to get to a point where that fight or flight can come down a little bit, and they can start to take in information, and then obviously progress through school and have positive outcomes, and then have a positive life as a result. And I think positive role models would work so much stronger than maybe a CAMS, for example. I'm not going to say therapy because there are some amazing,
absolutely.
100%.
I still think therapy
but as a
is
service,
amazing.
Maybe parts of it, we know are tough. And for the kids, connection is the biggest thing. It's the one thing why my work works well in schools is because I come in Daniel with my jewellery on, or like my tracksuit and my trainers,
and they all like look up to you like that, and they're like, oh.
But it's that connection piece, and I talk to them. And I'll use slang or talk to them, and I'll use words that they're familiar
with. You're still young enough as well that you can do it without, or do they call you old?
My time in education, I've got a short window left because I'm 28 now, so I've got to get it moving. I'm gonna have to
couple more years left of your 20s.
Couple more years, otherwise that connection piece is gone. Everything I'm talking about is not going to happen.
They're going to say, "Oh, you're 30." Oh no.
They'll say, "No, connection's gonna." I'll know when it'll happen as well. I know when, because I'll be able to sense it in the room. I'll say, "Dan, time's up, lad."
What do you know? You're old.
Exactly. Connection piece gone, but connection is super important, because if they don't connect with you, it doesn't matter what you say.
No.
Same with you with your therapist. If they don't connect with you or spend time understanding you, or just spend that time learning about you and just speaking to you like a human, it does not matter what they say, even if it's amazing. You're not going to listen to it because my barriers are still up, and I don't actually care for you and what you've got to say because you haven't.
I haven't formed that connection with you, so I don't have that safe space.
And I'm already hostile when I'm in
the room. And
I've already got my walls up. And so you need to show me. And if that doesn't, it's one. It's
interesting though, which I do agree with that completely, but also, I am someone who has never had their walls up. And I know it sounds really weird. I could talk to a stranger. I can talk to anyone, but I actually don't like that.
Would you say talking to a stranger or being open is the same as not having walls up?
I would say it's in no.
I'm a little bit like that in some senses, but there are scenarios in my life where walls are important, and I put them.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm very much, and I'm not saying this to like gloat, because actually I don't like it, because I actually think it's almost just as bad as having walls up, in a sense, because if I can talk about anything and everything at any time with anyone, where do I go to for the meaningful conversations? I know that there's always meaningful conversations around me, but ever since a young age, I found it really difficult when I was going to these therapy sessions because there was no walls up. I was telling this person everything, and she was listening to everything, yet there was no advice given on how to deal with things. And then it wasn't until I had a therapist about 2 years ago, so when I was 24, and I was doing the same thing like I would with everyone else, talk, tell them everything. But what I liked about him, he could see through that. It's kind of my surface level. Maybe I talk too much sometimes because I'm trying to fill a space, maybe. I don't know. But what I liked about this therapist in particular, and this is why it's so important to find one that works for you, because everybody is so different, but he sort of saw beneath that, me just sharing everything, he sort of said, right, tell me your story. And I'm there saying, well, I'm this, I'm that, and I said, I know you're going to ask about my childhood, so my childhood is this, it's that. And he said, okay, great, I love how honest you are. And he was listening and taking down notes of things that I'd said, and then he'd refer back to that, and he'd say, I want you to tell me, when you mentioned this specific thing, how did you feel at that time? And then I'd stop and think, how did I feel? Because I'm so easy to say, but how do I feel? You know, they're two separate things. So I'd look back and I'd think, well, I felt this way. And he said, well, what made you feel that way? And it was literally just a series. It was one little piece that I said at the start of that therapy session out of my whole blurb of me talking. And he managed to dissect it with me, and we managed to get into that and talk about it to the very core. And that's exactly where I found one of my triggers that makes me be, get into those mindsets. And I'd never had that with someone before. And I think where I can talk a lot, it literally felt like I had just never had someone who listened to me so intently and picked up maybe on a slight tone of voice difference of when I was talking about something, and asked me to just delve into that a bit more. And that's when we found I see it like like, what's it called, treasure box, like that's the treasure that I was looking for. That's where we found, not saying all the root to my issues, but that was one of them. And that was interesting.
I use the analogy of like headphone wires. So obviously everyone's on AirPods. Obviously when you keep them in your pocket and you pull them out your pocket after like a long day, what happens to them?
Get tangled.
They're all tangled, so you do know.
Yeah.
So they're all tangled. And I describe like my journey through therapy, exactly what you mentioned there, like as tangled headphone wires. The way that you untangle your headphone wires is you just start, you'll find a little hoop, and you'll think that one looks like a good one to pull. And you pull it, and it might be the wrong one, and it makes things tighter. And you pull another one over it, and it makes things a bit more complex. And you keep pulling, and you're trying these different ways, and sometimes you can't find the root initially. And it takes this process of pulling and trying different things to then, oh sweet, I can see a little bit why this is a bit looser now. And then the road starts to become a little bit clearer when you're untangling the headphone wires, to where you get to the end of therapy and you get to that point where you can see the clear path, and you're just going like this, bam, 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 and then you have your and that was what it was like. You had the end result, and that's what it was like for me. It was so tough at the start because I didn't know where to start.
That's always the thing.
I didn't know how to start. I didn't know what to pull.
When you find the right person that can talk that through with you, that is all it takes, that connection.
And it's time as well. Like I had like 40, 45, 50 sessions. Like, that's a lot of hours.
Over the course of how many? A year. 1 year, wow. So
every week for a year. 11 months, basically. Every Friday. And
I think that's a perfect amount though, when you get to that point when you really feel like you need it. It's every single week. So it's one.
Has to be.
Yeah, I think it's perfect. I think that is the right amount of time that you need to have that.
And it's so funny because you realise how rare you spend time with yourself until you go to therapy.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you face yourself for just an hour, once a week.
Yeah.
But then when that compounds and the things that you explore as a result, and that's the thing, you have to be willing to face those. Like you have to I had to face
vulnerability.
And it was so scary. And I had sessions where I'd go home, I wouldn't go home. I'd have 7 minutes to get from my therapy seat to my office seat, and because no one in the office knew that I was going to therapy. That was tough. But even afterwards, like, I would be drained.
Yeah,
I couldn't
and
think.
then you had to go straight back to work and hide it from everybody.
Because I was going on my lunchtime on a Friday lunch, so that people didn't know where I was going, because I could hide it.
Yeah.
You know, and even
so
that.
You always felt, sorry to interrupt, but did you always feel like ashamed that you were going to them?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And because I was Daniel who wore a Hugo Boss suit to work. I'm Daniel who is on the ping pong table all the time. Daniel who is like physically in shape and like, you know, has always loved the gym.
No, I think that's just so beautiful. That I was just thinking the fact that you're sitting here now and thinking about all the talks that you're doing. To think that one Friday afternoon you were ashamed and you're embarrassed and you tried to hide going to therapy, yet now you're standing in front of others trying to inspire and sharing your story. That's a transition.
You've given me a little moment. So I find it interesting because being a public speaker, my story has become a product in a sense.
Yeah, of course.
So there is a desensitization that happens because I'm turning up to do the talk.
Yeah.
Thank you, because it gives me little moments where I can sit back and go, this is actually real.
Yeah,
and like,
yeah.
You know, and
I know what you mean. You need that sometimes.
But having gone from like, I think, because that was only like 4.5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of time.
It's not a lot of time.
And, you know, to go from Daniel who had so much resistance and was struggling to speak and wanted to hide it from everyone and hated the idea that he was going to therapy and used to go home, spent, and didn't know why he was going and had to drag himself. I was having nosebleeds in the day from stress because of the therapy and the stress from work, and still turning up every single day. I was staying at my barber's. I couldn't afford rent because I have to pay for therapy, which was costing me like £400 a month.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
And you know, to go from that to then being able to have spoken to 50 odd thousand people, you know, trained.
That's probably one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard in my life.
I appreciate that. I don't think it's the most inspiring.
I did say one of. Yeah, I did say the.
I appreciate that as well. And I think the reason why I mentioned that then is one. I think a big thing for me is I don't want people to be looking at this of like, oh, this is you know, this is what you have to do if you've been struggling. You have to go on this journey. Yeah, I'm not saying that.
No.
I'm not saying that. And the other thing is my story, and this is why I wanted to just reframe that piece a little bit. So that wasn't a you thing. That was a me thing. Yeah. It was because also like my story isn't unique, and I know that from the amount of people that I speak to who will come and talk to me about suicide, and who will come and talk to me about abuse, or will come and talk to me about how many people they've lost and how they've been going through it for years, and all of these things. Like, my story isn't unique, which is also the reason why I say it, because everyone has their own little story.
100%.
And this is my thing. My business is called Damaged Goods, and people always say like, how can you use the word damaged with a mental health company? Like, can you use the word?
No, I love that word.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, of course.
I love it.
You tell me who doesn't have an area of their life.
We've been putting your posters up on my work, and I've put damaged goods and academia, and they went, wait, calling us damaged goods? I said, no. I said, that's Danny, and I was like, I love the name because at the end of the day, we all kind of are damaged goods. We're still good. We're still good to work, but we're all damaged in our own little ways.
What you tell me, somebody who doesn't have an areas of their life that is a little bit fragile. I feel important to utilise those moments at times, and yes, connect with your feeling, but channel that stuff into
and it's how you channel it.
And it's like that's the piece. So if you don't, if you don't use the pain for good, the pain will use you for bad. It's one of those.
Yeah.
If you don't channel it into the good, like, and take that initiative, and take the responsibility, and take all of that, and actually channel it into good. What's the word I'm looking for? Purposefully.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take a lot, then it will use you for the bad.
It's like yin and yang, isn't it?
Yin and yang, baby.
Absolutely. And you know who really brought me into that as well? Our mutual friend Alicia. She's so, I love it. And we have these conversations.
Thank you for setting this up, Alicia.
Thank you, Alicia. And Emma. But let's not forget Emma. But I remember sending Alicia, Alicia's like one of my absolute best friends. We've known each other since I was 2. And I sent her a voice note last month. I was going through a really tough time. And I said to her, you know, when I go through these moments, I kind of disappear a bit. I don't really talk to many people. And I said, she sort of sent me a message, just, you know, just checking in, you okay? I said, no, to be honest, I'm really not doing well. I'm not in a good place. Life just feels too much. And when I feel like that, I just don't even want to talk about what's going on, because it's too, there's me saying, oh, I talk about anything with everybody. But when I'm in these moments, I just can't, I kind of shut down. And her literal response was, life's like yin and yang. It's all going to be okay. Without the bad, you can't have the good.
Yeah.
And it's so true. And that's one thing that when I'm in these bad times, I like to remember, without the bad, I can't have the good.
How do you know what good is if there isn't any bad?
Well, exactly. And sometimes when you sit with that bad and you sit with those feelings, the more that you sit with them and you take them in and you feel them,
You stop fighting.
and you stop fighting them, because it can fester within you if you're not acknowledging your feelings and you're not caring for yourself, or just checking in within you. That can sort of fester within you. It will stay there. It will get bigger, and it will make itself louder, more known if you don't acknowledge it. But also, I feel that once you do that, actually, the quicker that you heal, because you spend that time. You're not just pushing it down within you. You're accepting it and you're dealing with it.
Yeah.
And then the better the good, I feel.
It's like another analogy that I like to use in context of what you just said, which is perfect, is, you know, let's say like a can of worms, for example. The worm, I'm using worms because obviously the stuff we're talking about the difficult emotions, which are the worms in the can.
Not headphone wires this time.
Not headphone wires,
No.
now we're on can of worms. Obviously the contents of that can are these little worms. We either have the option to just take, as they appear the head, just take them out one by one, or we stuff the can and they grow and they get bigger and the pressure builds and the can explodes maybe in 3-4 years and the worms go fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
And when you could have just every now and then just taken little bits out. And I think that's the importance. Is one of the things that I've learned, and I think I'm so grateful for having that experience through therapy, because even recently with what happened just last night, call my boys. Are you boys in? I need to come round. And they say, yeah, no problem. They set up the gaff, a little bit of wine,
I love that.
a tiny bit of wine there, and then we just spoke for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And, you know, just able to use that as a sounding board for me to process.
Yeah.
And the difference in how I felt pre and post. If I could bottle that and sell it, it'd be worth thousands.
Oh, 100%. I think your friends sometimes just, they are like your therapists, aren't they? And the way you can speak with them, and it's so beautiful to hear that you have that friendship group.
Yeah, but it's the power of that, as we said there, it's that power of feeling it. Go into it. Like go into
vulnerability again. I like that we keep linking back to this, because it's something that, like I said at the very start, I never really thought of vulnerability being deemed as weak, in a sense.
We may have to change the title to mental health, vulnerability, and Danny Wilsher.
Yeah, I need that in there. I really like that bit. I'm gonna take that bit. I like it. So this has been honestly amazing. I feel like I've learned so much from this podcast as well, which I knew I would, because obviously looking at how much you've done, and I think you're just a very inspiring person to have this conversation with, and I love how sort of open and honest you are about everything. Just to sort of finalise this up now then, I'd just like you to go briefly into how you started out doing all your public speaking. How you got to sort of where you are now in the present.
Yeah. I asked myself that question, and I think this is a really important question for people to ask themselves if they want to understand what they want to do with their life, and it's okay if you can't answer it. But if you feel you have something where, you know, you're close to committing to something, ask yourself the question: if money wasn't an object, or if my salary was like the minimum it could ever be, you know, and that didn't change for the rest of my time on this earth, what would I wake up every single day and do and still be happy doing? And you'll find the answer for what you need to do in life, and simplifying it in that sort of way. And for me, it was working with the kids. And so I started writing a book. I was in a job at the time, and we just got into lockdown, and I just joined a new company, and I wasn't eligible for furlough, so I was worried about the risk of losing my job, and that question came up. And so I answered it, and then I was like, okay, well, I know I want to speak to kids. What if I write a book? And so I started writing this book called Dreams of Wealth and Poor Mental Health, and just expressing. I was like, well, what's going to sell this book well? I was like, well, definitely the speaking, because if I can speak for 2 years, by the time the book's finished, I'll be able to sell the book as well, and share the message and the story. Amazing, wonderful. And then I started kind of like dipping my toes in the water, setting up some meetings with schools, just understanding and just talking very openly about kind of what I wanted to deliver in schools. So I got some luxury envelopes designed with my business name with silver foil on the front. So I'd set up the business, I designed myself a little website, and I was like, right, I posted some stuff on social media, and I was like, right, I'm going to send these letters out, I'm going to try and get some clients, because I knew my social media was working. And then I got these envelopes printed off with damaged goods in silver foil on the front, and then I got a wax stamp with DG made,
I love that.
and the red wax. And then I typed out like personalised letters, printed them all off, and then I put a handwritten letter. So that would be the first thing that they'd open.
Yeah.
And then I sealed 100 letters. I've got the photos of them I can show you afterwards. And I sent 100 handwritten letters of these Harry Potter letters out, because I was like, 300 people might get an email and not want to open it, but I was like, every single person is going to open that letter. 100. Yeah. So I knew I was going to get 100 out of 100, or at least open. I love that so much. Yeah. That was like how I started. Yeah. And then I started to get responses. I got like 30 responses. I was my ratio had gone to like from 300 to like 30 responses. Yeah. And I'm truly like so grateful for being able to sit in this position and to stand up tomorrow and to speak, because it could have gone very differently. Yeah. I could have not been here if I didn't speak. Absolutely. Genuinely, I was at that point, and thank God I did, and thank God I was able to do what perhaps wasn't able to in that sense, and and give purpose to him and the act of the suicide. I think is the biggest thing. Yeah. Because the act felt so purposeless, and so from this, I have given it purpose. You're giving in my own mind, in my own reality. That's world. Really beautiful, and that's a really powerful thing, and it also has changed my relationship with the suicide. Yeah. It's no longer this heavy thing; it's a beautiful part of my life. Genuinely, I'll sit here and I can say it to everyone. Like, I'm grateful for it, and I know my dad is working with me through everything. And I know that if I asked him to come back, I always talk about this. I say, look, if I asked him to come back, but I said, Nigel, big Nige, I said, listen, fella, you can come back, but all of these people that we've spoken to, or the kids that we've spoken to or mentored, or
that their lives have impacted, helped by being the story, being the purpose. But all of that goes away. But you can come back. He would say, "Nah, keep me up here. I'll continue to do the work from up here." That's what he would say. So, that is so. Good. I love that you even have those conversations.
But I think as a result of that, it's my keeping them alive. It's my connection with something higher than myself. So the spirituality piece, religion, whatever you want, whatever it is for you.
Absolutely, spirituality. I could do a whole
huge thing.
Oh, this is going to go on for 3 hours.
So we'll do the government and the system number 2, and then spirit. Yeah, sweet,
yeah,
fun.
Yeah. I've actually got my manifest book with me in my laptop bag.
Is that Roxy?
Roxy Nafusi, absolutely, yeah.
She's killing it.
Do you know? Have you seen her books as well?
I've seen her books. Yeah, I listened to her on a few podcasts.
No, she's okay.
Did a little bit of work
on it. But
I hadn't read the book.
I've got it here if you want to read it.
But about kind of that grief, is about, and sorry, that process of getting comfortable with loss. You can use those tools that I was mentioning there as a way to keep them alive, and to help you process. Whether it's writing music, that's another thing for me. Like, I have these tools now.
Keep them alive.
100%. What I've gone through the past yesterday is grief. It's a huge loss. But part of me knows how I'm going to move forward, because I've done it before, and I know what I'm going to turn to, and I know it's going to be the music. I know it's going to be, extracting all the positive that I can out of it, because that's the way that you move forward. It's not by dwelling on the shit. It's about viewing it and extracting all the positivity. It's about understanding what it's going to bring in the future. It's about relying on the people around me, processing those emotions, self-exploration. What is it teaching me? What's it giving me? What can I gain from this? What's it showing me about myself? What am I learning about myself from this experience? Because there's some stuff that's coming up. Okay, let me observe it. And sitting with it and being like, okay, sweet, I'm feeling it. and if it gets messy, allow it to get messy, because we're human.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, not too messy, just a little bit messy.
Just a little bit, it makes it more interesting.
But I hope you feel a little bit more confident in your approach.
I do now.
When it comes up.
I do now. I feel like I've had a therapy session as well, guys. I've loved it. I've loved it. Yeah. No, honestly, this has been probably one of my favourite conversations I've had in a very long time. So thank you so much, Danny. Pleasure. You've been amazing, and I can't wait for you to come to my work tomorrow and share your beautiful story and just how you are with my company as well. So, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye, guys.